Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast, where we share bold insights and real stories for people leaders building cultures and companies that scale. I'm your host, Desiree Booker-Sharpe, keynote speaker and CEO of Color Vision Lab. We're the people and culture consulting firm helping creative businesses design smarter systems and build high-performing teams. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Dan Cohen, principal at Full Court Press Communications. If you want to scale your business without sacrificing your culture, this conversation is for you. And if you're exploring ways to elevate your people strategy, DM us the word growth on LinkedIn for a free consultation. Dan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm amazing. Scale without sacrifice. I'm gonna try to live up to that goal. That's great. That's really great. And that is in a lot of ways at the core of good communications, which is how do you take your message to as many people as possible, make sure that it gets heard and that it's been used to encourage those folks to do what you want them to do. So I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Me too. That is what we are all about here at Bright Ideas. So let's go ahead and get started. I would love for you to share a little bit more about what you do at Full Court Press Communications, the clients you serve, and, what does your day-to-day look like as a CEO of your own company?
So for the folks that are listening, the company's called Full Court Press Communications. But what you need to know about me is that I am a recovering political consultant. I am a recovering corporate public relations guy, and I'm a recovering lawyer. And 25 years ago, I turned on my laptop one day and said, how do I take all these things? What you need to be successful in communications and politics, what big companies use to be successful in communications, and even how the lawyer thinks about a problem, thinking at it at a strategic level and not a tactical level. And how do we apply all those skills to help organizations that are trying to make social change in the world? So at the end of the day, Full Court Press Communications, our company, works with clients to try to change public conversations. So there's lots of great public relations firms in the world, and they can help you sell to B2B. They can help you sell B2C. What we really try to do is help sell ideas that help make the world a better place.
Wow, super dynamic background. I think that's going to add a lot of richness to this conversation. So tell me a little bit more about what your day-to-day looks like as a CEO. What do you focus on? Are you more so at the helm of business development? Are you in the weeds with the clients? Tell us more about that.
So about 7 years ago, we made a huge transition and that I and the team went remote. And when I went remote, I went really far away. So our team is based in Northern California. I actually moved all the way across the world to Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, being 10 hours ahead of time and being 10,000 miles away from the team, I had two choices. One was I could either fly back and forth every week, or I had to learn how to delegate and learn how to empower the people who we already invested in as employees to really turn them into employees as partners. So a couple of things that I did is I brought in one of those employees as a partner and elevated her. She now serves as the chief operating officer. And my partner, Sarah, really manages the business on a day-to-day basis. So that's all the operations, all the human resources, recruiting, systems, finance, those kinds of things. As the CEO and being so far away, I really focus on just a couple of things. One is solving really big problems. Right. So as someone who's been doing this work for 30 plus years, and I'm old, you're very young, I'm old. I've been doing this a long time. So I get to solve those problems that nobody else can figure out how to solve. The second is I really leverage a network of people that I've been working with, people that I've known for decades for the big business development actions. So we don't expect our staff to do new business development in a traditional way. That really is incumbent on Sarah and I as the organizational leaders. So I sell and I solve big problems. And I also try to look out to the future. So as the CEO, we're going to probably talk about amazing things like AI and other things. I'm also the one responsible for saying, okay, where's our business going? Where's our industry going? And how do we make sure that our team is ready at the time when that happens?
I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that decision to bring one of your employees in as a partner earlier in the business. I think you mentioned her name is Sarah. She's the chief operating officer. What are some of the qualities that Sarah possessed that made you want to entrust her with such a huge responsibility in your company? I think as SMB founders, letting go of control can be one of the hardest things, especially when you're in the beginning. So, as a leader yourself, what did you see in her that made you want to tap her for this role?
Wow, what a powerful question. I think some of it was seeing a couple of failed partnerships, one that I was in and one that my father was in, where it really wasn't a partnership of equals. It was really a partnership that was extremely unbalanced or imbalanced. I think in this case, if I looked at the things that I'm good at and I looked at the things that I'm bad at, there's almost a perfect yin yang about what Sarah and her superpowers are and my superpowers and how they really matched up. I think that would be the first thing. And then I think the second is we shared a vision for what this business, especially a small business, is really meant to do. I think a lot of people, and I know that I fell into this early, maybe about year 10. We've been at this about 25 years now. So, year 10 to year 12, I was going to take over the world. I was going to open multiple offices. I was going to scale big. And what I found was all that did was take me farther away from the work instead of push me towards the work. And it also made me compromise a lot of the values of how did we treat people, how did we treat our clients, and how did we value them as a key part of the business. And so Sarah shared a lot of the ways that I looked at the world in terms of this business is about helping our clients. This business is about investing in our team, helping them grow, making sure that if they move on better than we found them, that they leave working with us with a set of skills they didn't have, that they've grown as individuals, they've grown as counselors, which is really what we call ourselves at Full Court Press. A lot of professional services firms look at these things as being, you're an account executive. Well, we actually think of ourselves as counselors. We're right there next to our clients all the time, trying to help them grow. And so Sarah and I both shared a vision that the people who work with us will over time become better and better and better counselors. Those were some things that we shared.
Amazing. There's such a special connection that is to be formed when you are in the weeds, in the trenches with someone building something from the ground up, especially when that person has a vested interest in your shared vision. Typically, those are the people, those number twos, right hand man, woman, whatever's your jam, they stick around and get to see the company blossom and flourish. And Sarah's still with you today, right?
100%. And look, one of my friends, I have a business mentor who had a number two person for a long time and didn't show this level of respect and didn't show this level of honor to this other person who had helped that person build that business. And I watched what happened when that person left. I watched the heart of that business really leave. And I thought that that really wasn't what would be good for our clients and what would be good for our staff and what would be good for this person who was my friend and a partner in building this journey. Yes, I built it for a decade before she arrived, but growth has been stratospheric in not just economics, but in the way we do our work, the way we set up systems, the way we grow our talent. All that comes from her. And so that wouldn't have happened had we not sort of formed this more deeper partnership.
In the past year, Dan, what has changed the most about how you lead or run your business?
Look, I mean, I think AI is everything. I know that a lot of the people listening to this will be creatives and will be in the creative services industry. What I can say is, as a creative services founder, how we integrate artificial intelligence is terrifying. The one thing that scares me the most is promising clients that we're going to use our expertise, our superpowers, our culture to help them solve a problem and then press a button instead and have it be some kind of LLM generated solution. That terrifies me for a couple of reasons. One is we work with public agencies, right? That's fraud, and I don't want to commit fraud. Second, that isn't who we are as people. Like, we put our heart into this work, and our heart doesn't live in an LLM. Our heart lives inside us as individuals and our life experiences, and we bring that to the table. So I think that the last year has been around trying to understand what's out there, the tools that are out there, trying to understand the boundaries in which we can use these tools, and trying to identify the spaces. Maybe, I guess, in sort of financial services, they call it the back end, right? So, how can we use these tools in the back end where it isn't relevant to clients, but maybe it's helping us with HR management, it's helping us with time management, it's helping us with finances, but not in the delivery of the services. So, for me, and I'm sure for your listeners, trying to figure out what AI is and how in a small firm where what we do is art, not science, can really be applied.
Very interesting. And definitely a common trend that I speak about, or I have spoken about with all of the guests that I've interviewed so far on the podcast. And all of them are now shifting business strategy to be able to adapt to the rise of AI. To your point, figuring out how to, one, maintain business viability and their competitive edge as AI grows to be more popular, but also wanting to learn how to harness it to their advantage, because there's a real opportunity in leveraging AI to accelerate teams, to make them more innovative, creative, etc. So let's talk a little bit more about change. So when change hits, whether it's planned or unexpected, how do you typically communicate with your team around those changes? I would love to hear more about that from the internal perspective with your own team, but also with your clients as well as they're navigating change.
I'd say change is at the heart of what we do. We're always trying to help our clients drive change. In terms of what you're describing, it's sort of that internal change. It could be a crisis within an organization. It could be an executive transition, which can often be terrifying within organizations. And what I'd say, it comes down to really three things. It comes down to how you as a leader set expectations for this moment of change. I keep a post-it note next to my desk that was in a coffee shop I saw one time. And you know how sometimes there's a quote and it's like, be nice to people, and it says Gandhi next to it or something, right? So this one says, I ruin everything, and it quotes expectation, right? Expectation, especially in a time of change, sets the ground rules. It sets everything. So being very clear with your audience, whether it's internal or external, about what to expect. Here's what we can tell you. Here's what we can't tell you yet. Here's the timing in which we think we can tell you. So those expectations are critical. I think the second is having an understanding of that audience. What do you know about these people, right? Do you gather them once a month for a session? Are you fully remote? Do you have any idea who works with you or what motivates them? And leveraging what you know about these individuals can help you make sure that the communications you develop land in a way that's going to be successful with those people. And then I think the third is to recognize that communications itself has changed, right? You just said at the beginning of the podcast, if you want to learn more about your business, text me or type something in on LinkedIn, right? Those are two forms of communications that 10 years ago didn't exist, right? So we have a whole new generation coming into the workforce that communicates differently. So understanding the channels, understanding how to communicate through these channels, whether it's internally with your staff or externally with your customers, is really critical. And maybe to put a cherry on that, to think about it in terms of surrounding your audience, whether it's again internal or external, like you're going to have to hit them multiple times and make sure that the same message lands in multiple ways and multiple times in order to break through the clutter that's out there.
Wow, so much there. I think that this is a really critical conversation to have, especially now as so many organizations, particularly in the US, are going through layoffs, restructuring, so many different shakeups in, senior leadership in the C-suite. And I think that because these are such unprecedented changes in times, they're going silent because they either don't know what to say, or maybe they don't have a culture that's rooted in transparency. And so the communication just falls flat. And I think you also made a great point of knowing your people, knowing how they receive information, the right messaging to get through to them, and disseminating it across multiple channels, multiple times. I think that's so important. I like for this podcast to be rooted in anecdotal stories when possible. So, is there an example that you can share of a time when the approach that you've just shared with us around communicating through change has made a difference, whether it be for your company or for one of your clients?
I think some of the most traumatic communications that can happen internally is within an internal educational institution. So we have worked with college presidents, private school heads of school and boards, where people are paying a lot of money and investing a lot of themselves into an entity. And then all of a sudden, that entity has to go through some kind of seismic leadership change at the top. And what I would say is too often, those audiences focus far too much externally and far too little internally. So, for example, we worked with a private university in California let's just say they had about 3,000 students and about 600 employees, right? That private institution was far too worried about what the local newspaper was going to say than giving their students who were paying them tens of thousands of dollars and their employees who were earning tens of thousands of dollars working there an understanding of this transition, what it meant, why it happened, what it was going to mean for the institution. And what happens is it creates like a little brush fire. And if you don't starve that brush fire of new rumors and new oxygen, that fire can grow. And so what we like to do is with our clients in these moments of great transition is to make sure that there's a clear flow of information. There are trusted voices for that information. And there's a way to squash some of those most difficult rumors because as you know, if there's no oxygen, there's no fire. And in these small communities, all it takes is one mishap and you can ruin a reputation for a generation. So when I think about the anecdotal work that we've done, at least in terms of prioritizing internal communications, prioritizing the people who are a part of it and setting reasonable expectations, I would say that those small cocoons really serve as a model for how any business can think about communicating through a challenge.
Wow. You kind of already touched on this, but I'm curious to hear maybe one thing that your team is doing really well right now. What's something you're really killing it at?
Well, when I was first in politics, I was a 21-year-old sleeping on sofas in Arizona and Florida trying to get really amazing people elected. I had a political mentor who taught me that the bad news has to come first. And it's actually something that now, many decades later, Sarah actually put in at Full Court Press, which is we want to know when you need help, right? It's very difficult in a business for someone to raise their hand and just say, I need help. Whether it's you want to call it triage, whether you want to call it a no fear policy. Desiree, if you and I were working in an office together, right, and I was feeling under siege, I might turn to you for help, but I might actually ask my boss for help because I don't want my boss to think that I can't do my job. But work ebbs and flows, right? And at a professional services firm, there may be months where we've sold 120% of our employees' capacity, and there'll be months where we've sold 70% of our employees' capacity. And in those months where things are really busy, we have a no fear, raise your hand triage policy that says, I need help. And building a culture where someone on a Monday can say, my week looks like hell and Sarah especially, but the two of us can sit and look and say, okay, well, who has some bandwidth this week? Who can help this week? So that it's fear free, right? You, Desiree, if you worked for us, would never have to be afraid that, like, oh my God, I can't get all my work done. Because if you can't get all your work done, that's not your fault. That's my fault as the leader. I've given you the wrong amount of work to do. So I would say that that is key to how we think about empowering, growing, all of our staff. And what I would say is one of my mentors also looks at, let's call it disaster communications. Her name is Mrs. Duct Tape, right? She sort of the one you want to go to when there's a natural disaster or anything like that. And she believes in fear-free training, right? No one's going to prepare for a disaster because they're scared. They're going to prepare for a disaster because they know by preparing, they have water, they're fit enough to be able to walk a mile, they have $20 in their pocket. So being prepared is how you get to be fear free in these environments. And so we've tried to look backward to our own team and say, okay, the way to make sure that our employees feel confident is that if they don't feel confident, they raise their hand. And then it's my problem, not their problem.
I absolutely love that approach for so many reasons. I think that one, there's an extreme amount of self-awareness, emotional intelligence that just shine through in how you talked about this policy. I love that you took accountability for your responsibilities as a leader, knowing when your team is overwhelmed, when they've been inundated with too much work and they need for you to help them reprioritize, but then also creating the space for people to be honest about when they are struggling. So many people don't have that. And I think that it's an even tougher experience for marginalized employees in the workplace who are up against, microaggressions and, covert discrimination, racism, whatever it is, who feel like if I say one thing that makes me look incompetent, this could jeopardize my career here. And so I think that creating that space helps people to be able to do their best work because they're not second guessing themselves all the time. Have you seen that?
Let me reflect on one of our clients who I think sort of speaks to this. We have worked for an organization called Black Doc Village. And one of the things that happens is that young Black physicians in residency programs are dismissed from those programs and disciplined in those programs at rates that are 10 or 20 times higher than their white counterparts. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It is so rooted not in their actions, but in others and others misunderstanding, others demanding things from Black residents that they don't demand from other residents, from individuals taking out personal vendettas, and Black docs don't have a network within the community. So a wonderful physician in the Bay Area created this organization so that these young Black residents don't feel alone as they go through these residency programs. What they get is they get access to networks of Black and other doctors around the country who can say, "You're not crazy. This is insane." And at the same time, it's an outside organization that can shed light on this work through media like we help them with, or social media, or speaking engagements, and raise this as a national problem. Because here's the thing: when Black patients get seen by Black doctors, their results are stratospherically better. Now, why that is, we can have a really long conversation. But if we want to look at medical outcomes in this country, part of the way we get there is by having Black doctors serving Black patients where they can generate amazing outcomes together. So, what I would say is what we tried to take from that is to understand our role as leaders within an organization to shape the culture of the organization. And that's, I think, what your CEO leaders who are listening and your small business leaders who are listening, people are going to look to you, especially in times of crisis, for how you react and what your expectations are that you set for people. Everybody's going to make mistakes every day. I make tons of them. The question isn't, do you make mistakes? The question is, do you learn from them? Do you have a culture that allows people to grow and not walk around in fear? And I think that that's what we can do as small business leaders, and in your case as a consultant and a trainer and a valued resource to the field, is we have to teach people to operate from a space of abundance and not of fear.
Absolutely. Everything that you said, I think, is incredibly valuable, specifically to the SMB founder CEO community, because I find that many of us are insecure about how we can attract aligned, high caliber talent when maybe we can't afford to pay the top salaries. And I think that we offer something special in our culture, especially if we care about the culture and we're people first leaders. You're able to offer a space where people can feel like they're cared about as a whole person and not just their work output as an employee. And so I think that what you've shared is really a huge piece of what your employer brand could be and how you sell your workplace and retain talent when you can't pay top dollar. I appreciate you sharing that.
I do want to push back a little bit because I do think you have to pay. I think that I tried for a long time as a small business leader to get away with the idea that I wonder if I can shave off some money here or not pay enough there. And what I found was it was more a reflection on me than it was on my employees. My employees were amazing and they had a great culture, and usually they didn't want to leave. But because I wasn't transparent about, look, this is what people who do this job in the world make, and you as an employee are going to be somewhere in that space. So we worked with an external consultant who helped us create basically pay bands. So you may not be earning what you could earn top dollar if you were working somewhere else, but you're at least competitive. And we're in the Bay Area, right? So the Bay Area is extremely expensive. So we can't mess around if we want to keep really good talent. So what we try to do is we try to methodically move people in their career through skills and then match that as best as we can methodically with salary that is within the range of what a person who works in a position like this, who works on the coast in America, would be making. And we're not perfect. And I'm sure that our employees, every single one of them, would probably love to make 10 or 20 or 30% more. But we do what we can to stay within those bands of our peers. And what we found is that works for us. I can't say it'll work for everybody, but being transparent, being clear, being open with what we can offer and why we're offering it can really go a long way.
Absolutely. I totally agree with being competitive. So I'm reflecting on some of my hiring processes where I've had candidates who are trying to compare what I can offer to what a big four consulting firm is offering them, which is just
Yeah,
it's not comparable, right? That's the same as maybe if a candidate is coming to you expecting to get paid what they might at Edelman or, an extremely large PR firm, right? So I agree. Being competitive is super important, but you have to use some discretion in terms of how you
absolutely. And
strategize
listen, not
past.
everybody gets to go to work every day to try to change the world.
Mhm.
Right? And in a lot of ways, I have great competitors who work in technology. They provide PR services to technology. One of my dear friends is a vice president at one of the big global public relations firms. But the amount of time that he gets to work on projects that literally impact lives, like we talked about with Black Duck Village, like we talked about at the universities, like we've talked about at some of the global philanthropy that we work with, is zero versus 100% at our company. And so what we offer and what our competitive employment offer to people is you're going to come here and you're going to do work that matters. And that really resonates with some people. And those are the kind of people that we want to work with.
Dan, could you share a moment when you felt like your leadership was tested? I would love to learn a little bit more about what that moment was and what it taught you about yourself as a leader.
In the 2007, 2008 economic crisis, we had just expanded by 50%. We were looking at going to set up a new office in two additional cities, and we were extremely overextended. And I had to make some really hard decisions at that time about what was I really building? What, if anything, was I willing to give up? And what happened was at the same time that we were thinking about these extensions of ourselves, we were watching our clients withdraw. Remember, many of our clients are nonprofits and philanthropies, right? So when times are bad, times are really bad, right? They can't sell their way out of those problems. So we watched our business really shrink, and it was extremely, extremely humbling, and it took a long time to work my way through. And what I'll say is for many SMB founders, the business and your personal ego are 100% attached. And what 2007, 2008 taught me is that there has to at least be a tiny little gap. Doesn't have to be a big gap. But when my business was struggling and borderline failing, I wasn't a terrible person. I was up against terrible circumstances, but I wasn't a terrible person. And I will tell you that that struggle over those 2 years to just put a tiny bit of distance between me and the business was probably the most important thing that's happened to me in my professional life. Because what it's allowed me to do is take even just a tiny pause or a tiny breath when I think about what's going on in the business and have it not be a personal reaction, but have it be a reaction that is a blend of me, a blend of what's best for the business, a blend of what's best for the employees, and a blend of what's best for the clients instead of just being an ego trip. And for a lot of small business founders, and this was frankly one of the challenges with my father's business partner, is it was always about him. And the fundamental thing is these businesses aren't about us. They're about our clients, they're about our staff, they're about this larger thing we built together. So what I would say is that's something that I learned, that this failure and success of the business, while it is a reflection on me, it isn't the totality.
I think it takes a ton of maturing to reach that point of understanding and realization in your leadership journey because when you're building something brick by brick, when you're pouring your personal finances, your energy, your time, you're making sacrifices with your family to make the thing work, whatever it is, it becomes personal for many founders and CEOs. And when you're weathering those storms, those seasons where things are just not gelling, you're on the decline and you don't know how you're going to pull yourself out of it, it can feel it's just very difficult to separate the business from the personal. And I think that after you've been in business for a while and you've weathered multiple storms, the first couple are hard. They're very humbling, but then you start to develop this muscle, this resilience where you know how to bounce back mentally from it. I think that's a good lesson to share for people who may be at the earlier stages of their entrepreneurial journey and are, weathering some early storms in the business.
100%. And there's an old phrase that in Washington, if you want a friend, get a dog because your dog's going to always love you. And we're thankfully, many of us are surrounded by people who love us no matter what, whether it's our family or our network of friends or our community or the people we volunteer with. And it's in those darkest moments that you figure out that those are the people that really matter and that all of us go through struggles. And as small business owners, we may go through unique struggles, but they're no different than people who are going through health struggles or going through life struggles. Like we all struggle. And the real opportunity for us as humans and this journey we're all on is to learn how to help each other.
Dan, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for your transparency. I always like to wrap up my episodes by asking each guest what their one bright idea is. So a bright idea could be a mindset shift, a strategy, a tool, something that has made a positive impact for you as a leader or your business lately. What would be that one bright idea?
I think I'd lose my communications license if I didn't give you a communications tip. Right. So I think what I would say is we are 100% in a time of communications revolution, right? This is not an evolution, whether it's AI, social media, or any of these tools. We are in a revolution. And in times of revolution, nobody has all the answers. But the challenge for us as small, medium-sized business owners is we still have to be in the game, right? We still have to be out there communicating. And if we're not, that silence speaks for us. So if you as a listener aren't sure about what to communicate, what I would say is get out there, be communicating with your customer or your staff in mind, set clear expectations, and then try every possible communications tool out there until you start getting the traction that you're wanting. This is not a time to be shy. This is a time to be brave.
There you have it, folks. Dan, if there's someone in the audience who wants to learn more about full court press communications, what's the best way for them to get in contact?
So you can look us up on the web at fcpcommunications.com. What I would encourage folks to do is to actually sign up for our newsletter. My political mentor believed in something called radical generosity. And so everything we learn as professionals, we try to write up in a blog post and share with like 3 tips on this and 5 tips on this so that it can be used by the field. So if you go to our blog, you will find tons of articles about how to talk to reporters, how to give a speech, how to speak to employees, how to get through a crisis. Here's a checklist for ways to get through a crisis. Like anything you might need as a business owner or a C-suite leader, a lot of those tools are going to be on our website and they're all free. And, the whole goal is to just, make everybody better.
Amazing. Dan, thank you so much for your time. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Desiree. You're amazing. And I'm happy to be at the start of what I'm sure will be a rocket ship of success with this podcast and looking forward to being on the 100th episode somewhere down the road.
Thanks for tuning in to Bright Ideas. If today's episode gave you something to think about, here's your next step. DM me the word growth on LinkedIn to start a conversation about how we can help you scale smarter. And if you're a founder, CEO, or senior talent leader with a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out about joining me on a future episode. And if you don't want to miss future conversations, be sure to follow the show, leave a quick rating, and download your favorite episodes to take them on the go. Your support helps more leaders discover bright ideas. Until next time, be bold, be resilient, be sharp. I'm Desiree B. Sharpe.